So as I kind of alluded to in the last video I uploaded, I went to go and attempt the valve clearance check. I mean, you guys have seen the brake video. You guys have seen me, do other mods and other work on the bikes. I enjoy working on them. I reference torque specs. I double check what I'm doing. So I'm not just some ham-fisted idiot who's never held a wrench in his life. I know what I'm doing. And I thought I had prepared ahead of time, gotten, well, let's go this way. Thought I had gotten everything that I needed all set for the job, and I went to do it. And everything went smoothly, taking everything apart. Made sure to put everything in Ziploc bags and label every single part in Sharpie. Made sure I kept everything organized, kept everything lined up, drew diagrams of how I was going to deal with the valves when they were out of spec, and 3 of them were. 3 valves were a little too wide of a gap by 0.04 of a millimeter, which may not seem like a lot, but you gotta figure that there's only so much clearance that is supposed to be there, and if it goes out of spec, the bike's just not going to run well over time. So yeah, figured I'd go ahead and get on that. It was time for the repair. Ordered the parts through Interstate Cycles or Triumph Lake Norman, whatever name they're going by, over in Mooresville, because they're the closest Triumph dealership that I knew of at the time. I since have learned that there is a closer one and better one. We'll get to that later. But I ordered the parts I needed, or so I thought, and went to assemble everything only to realize that I'm an idiot and measured badly. Or not so much I measured badly, but what I did was the gap was, say the gap is supposed to be this wide. And I noticed that the gap was actually this wide. So I had to order a shim that would bring the gap back down to what it was supposed to be. I ordered a yet smaller shim, which would have made the gap even more out of spec, which is not good. So realizing this mistake, I said, all right, screw it. I'm just going to go ahead and throw it all back together again and take this to a dealer and have them deal with it, because I figured I had been working on this for, at this point, it had been 2 weeks just to get the parts and do all this work, and the weather was starting to get kind of nice, and I'm like, let's just take it to a shop and get it over and done with. They'll be able to do it in like a week at most. So went to throw everything together, went to fire it up, and nothing. Like, lights came on, I heard the fuel system engage, hit the starter, and just one audible click. Nothing. Nothing happened. There was just that single audible click. I was like, okay, maybe the battery's dead. Charged the battery on a battery tender. Went to fire it up again, same deal. Just click, 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 nothing. I'm like, okay, the engine is not wanting to even start to turn over. What did I screw up? Took it all apart, realized that the intake and exhaust cams were swapped. The main cam has a dot on one part and slash on the other part. Dots line up with dots, slashes line up with slashes, but it's inversed, like on the other end, which is where I was taking the bike apart and putting it back on. So I inadvertently swapped them, not realizing my mistake. That, or at some point the rear wheel had spun ever so slightly while the cams were off, which is another possibility. Regardless, this meant that my timing may have been out of spec. It meant that the cams were not good, and it meant that I could have potentially had a big problem. So I took everything back apart, took off the alternator cover, because at this point I needed to reference the timing marks in there, and up until then I was getting away with just spinning the rear wheel. So took out that off, made sure the timing was back in, put everything back together again, bike fired up, but something was clearly off. It was not running the way it should, and I immediately cut the engine and got a tow truck to take it in. So I got the bike towed to to Interstate Cycles up in Mooresville, or Triumph Lake Norman. At the time, it was the closest dealer I knew that was authorized to work on Triumphs. Got it towed there and explained in as much detail as I could to the service tech who was behind the counter. Now, I'm not going to throw out names, although I do very, very, very heavily blame these 2 individuals for it. I'm not going to throw them under the bus, but yeah, I went there and talked to, I'll just call him Jay. I worked with 2 guys, I'll call them J and M. while I was there, and the whole time had just the worst customer service I have ever had at any kind of dealer. So I brought the bike in, and, you know, it showed up on a tow truck. I had like a long face because, you know, I was bummed. I had already been without a bike for so long. Walked up to the counter and, you know, just, well, why the long face? Like, I explained everything as best I could to Jay, and, you know, explained, here's my biggest concern. The cams were swapped. The engine did not turn over. I did not manage to start the engine while the cams were swapped. All I heard was an audible click. Realized a mistake, put it all back together again. Wasn't running right, brought it in. And, like, you know, picture what somebody would say at a dealership where their only job is customer service and dealing with customers. And picture what they would say in that situation. That is not what they said. What not Jay had said, or M, another guy who was behind the counter, was there, and he said, oh, tried to save some money doing yourself, huh? Didn't want to take it in, huh? And it's like, okay, listen here, a-hole. You don't have to go through and belittle me. I'm not an idiot. This isn't my first time working on a bike. I realized a mistake, identified the mistake, explained the mistake, and now you're here belittling a customer. That was my first sign that I should not have been at that dealer. So warning sign number 1, they belittle you, or they don't take you seriously. If you go into a dealership and they're putting you down and dealing and, like, you know, making it like you don't matter, it doesn't care, they don't care, run. Find it someplace else. Find dealers someplace else, because, like, it did not get better from there. The entire time my bike was there, nobody said sorry at all, except for, like, the last day, but I'll get to that later. So explained everything to Jay, explained I need the timing checked, I need the valves checked, and I need that sound identified and dealt with, because I am worried that a piston may have made contact with a valve, and I'm concerned. So he said, oh, okay, we'll get you taken care of. We'll need you to authorize 1 hour of service for now. We can add more as we go. I'm like, yeah, fine. So they charged, you know, authorized 1 hour of labor, and I left the bike there and drove to work. About, like, maybe like 3-4 hours later, got a phone call from them saying, hey man, we got the bike running. I'm like, oh, that's fantastic news. He's like, but it's not running well. You know, it's running a little rough, and there's an engine noise. We think it could be a sticking valve. Our techs are thinking that, you know, they could just add some additive to it, run the bike for a little bit, ride it around, and see if that clears it up. I'm like, yeah, perfect, great, thank you so much. And then I was like, keep me posted. He's like, yeah, okay. Hung up, and then no communication for 2 days. I'm like, okay, that's weird. Like, 3 hours they got all this done, and now 2 days later I have heard nothing. I'm like, that's weird. Called them up and said, hey, what's the holdup? They're like, oh, sorry, man, our techs just haven't gotten a chance to look at it. We're thinking it's a sticking valve. And I'm like, yeah, you told me this already. I'm like, oh, okay. Hung up. 2 more days passed. I'm like, okay, is it serious that an entire week no techs have been able to, like, get to my bike? I'm like, that's kind of messed up. So, you know, I happened to be in the area running errands, drive by and stop, and I talk to him, and I go, hey, so what's up? And, you know, Jay looks at me and goes, oh, yeah, man, so our techs, we just haven't had a chance to look at it yet. We're thinking it's a sticking valve. Our techs want to, like, put an additive in it and run it maybe without the valve cover on it. I'm like, okay. It's kind of weird that you keep telling me the same exact thing over and over and over again, but all right, whatever. I get it. You guys must be busy. He said, yeah. By the way, we need you to authorize a 2nd hour of labor. I'm like, again, kind of weird considering it's been a week and y'all have done basically nothing beyond the valve clearance, but sure. So I authorized the 2nd hour of labor. That is important. That will come in later. And then I leave. Now, the next week, I'm busy. I'm just busy moving and all this other stuff. So, after that week, after another week passes of absolutely no communication from these people again, I call them up again and say, hey, It has now been 2 weeks. What is going on? What are you people doing with my bike? And like, I don't say that, but I'm clearly upset over the phone. I'm like, hey, my bike's been there 2 weeks. Could somebody explain to me like what's going on? And like Jay told me over the phone, like, oh yeah, there's so our techs think it could be a sticking valve, but it also could be the backlash gear. Our techs are like going back and forth with Triumph techs over the phone. And it's like, okay, it does not inspire me with confidence that your people are having to call help desks to identify and fix a problem. So that's another sign. If your bike has been there for way longer than it should be for a job, or there's no communication, that is another warning sign. And the third warning sign is they're admitting that they have no idea what's going on or what to do. Okay? And it was around this point that I started thinking in my back of my head, I should really be recording all these conversations, because it was around this time I realized this was not a good shop. This was not a reputable shop for me to be bringing my Triumph to. Maybe they're better with other bikes, but for Triumphs, dear God in heaven, it was just going downhill so fast. So fast forward another week after that, and I get a text message from him. I'm like, okay, what does this say? And it says, hey, it's Jay from Interstate Cycles. We got your bike running and it's ready. So we do have, it is still making engine noise. Our techs think that it is a sticking valve like we discussed. We've put an additive in the oil and in the gas tank, and it should clear up. So basically, I had authorized a second hour of labor for them to pour 2 things into the engine, and that's it. So far as I could tell, and so far as anyone there was able to explain, nothing else had been done to my bike during the 2 other additional weeks that it was there. So needless to say, I was salty enough when I arrived. But at this point, I was just fed up not having a bike. So I showed up, went to pick up the bike, and they're like, okay, so sign here. You're paying for 2 1.5 hour things of service. So 3 hours of service total. And I should have pressed them on it. I should have argued, because I was clearly getting ripped off. Clearly they were trying to extort me for an extra hour of service. But at this point, I didn't care. I just wanted to get my bike and get out of there. So got on my bike, fired it up. Immediately, there in the parking lot, I could tell it was running even worse than when I had the bike myself. Because when I had the bike, at least, when I fired it up, it was just idling funny, and I could hear a little bit of a tick. When they give it to me, there was a lot of it was more than ticking. In hindsight, it was knocking. It was banging in the engine. And you could see smoke coming out of the right tailpipe. And it's like, okay, this thing is clearly misfiring and struggling to idle. What in the hell did these people do to it? But whatever, I just said, all right, fine. I've had a Miata that had a sticking valve before, and it did clear up after like 100 miles of driving it with an additive. So maybe this will clear it up too. So I hop on the interstate and I just ride. Like back and forth, back and forth. Put just shy of like 200 miles on it in a day. Take it back to them the next day, because at this point, the ticking is, it's just loud. It is loud, obnoxious. It doesn't sound healthy. It doesn't sound right. People on forums are telling me this is just what the engine does. The people who work there were telling me this is just what the engine does. But I don't care. At this point, M enters the picture. M is supposedly the service manager there. Or one of them. I don't know if they have multiple. But I go in and I say, I need a manager or a tech or somebody who works on this bike and knows what they're talking about to come out here, listen to this engine one more time with me, and I need them to look me in the eye and tell me exactly what they put in my engine and what I should be doing, and should I be worried about this. So M comes out, he shows me the bottle of what they put in the engine and gas tank. He explains that it is a sticking valve, and generally it takes about 500 miles riding around for it to do its thing. I'm not buying this one bit. It should not take 500 miles to clear up a sticking valve, especially not at highway speeds. So, I explain my concerns. I'm like, you are positive that that is it, and you will stand by that. He's like, yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. I'm like, okay, fine. So I hop on the bike,
And I start like riding around town doing a few more errands I had up in Mooresville, and hop on the interstate to head home. It's sundown by this point, and I'm riding, and all of a sudden I hear like bang, and I look and I feel something like bang, like ping off of my right shin. Look down, I can see a hole in the top of the crankcase, smoke coming out of it, oil behind the bike. And I'm like, cool, that's fun. This is something I have to deal with now. So naturally, the engine died when that happened, and I just coasted as far as I could on the side of the highway, on the side of the interstate. Come to a stop, get the bike towed back to the shop, and I'm like, all right, hopefully these conversations I had with these people will like jog something. Hopefully they'll be willing to put something right, or at the very least be able to work with me on this a little bit. That was a mistake. So I go in. They were closed Sunday, Monday. Came in Tuesday, first thing when they opened. Sat outside and waited for them to open. Waited till 9 o'clock. Walked inside. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't raise my voice or anything like that. Didn't have a tone. But walked in, and Jay was there, and Jay goes, hey man, what's going on? In like the usual monotone, expressionless voice. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, what do you mean what's going on? You had to have seen the bike out front. There's no way you didn't see it. There's no way you didn't know this was coming. So I step up, I'm like, so engine's got a fucking hole in it. And that's what I said in that tone of voice at that volume. Immediately, Jay turns to me and goes, all right, so what do you want me to do about it? You come in here cursing, bad attitude, ruining my week, ruining my week and making my week that much rougher because I'm here just trying to do my job and you're here trying to make it difficult. And he's raising his voice at me. He's pointing at me like this. I'm like, what is going at? Like, even one of his coworkers on the side is like, just tone it down a bit. It's like, what kind of an a-hole do you have working here? Like, did I flip you off? Did I curse at you? No. I was saying the engine has a fucking hole in it. That is what I said. I didn't say you put the hole in the engine. I'm not saying that. But the fact that you went immediately on the defensive like that tells me you knew dang well that you guys had screwed up in some way. You knew dang well that your shop was in the wrong. And you're trying to now pin it on me. And, you know, he, of course, goes off on it. This might not happen if you didn't try to do a job that you knew you needed specialty tools and that you were unprepared for. And it's like, are you kidding? That's why I brought it in here, is to prevent this outcome, because I realized my mistake and that I was in over my head. And I trusted you and your shop, hey, man, to deal with this problem and prevent this exact outcome. And it was just awful. At this point, I demanded that I see M, who came out, looked at it. He's like, oh, yeah, I mean, that can happen with a sticking valve, or, you know, it could be something else. And I'm like, okay, I don't care what it is. Like, your shop is not willing to admit fault in any way on this? He's like, nah, I mean, you were the one who initiated the repair. I'm like, all right, whatever. And then I'm like, all right, could you at least get me a quote on an engine swap? He's like, oh, well, an engine swap might not be necessary. We could just do a rebuild. We got like guys who do the head, who can do the cylinders and all that. I'm like, all right, if you think it's going to come out cheaper that way, by all means, go ahead and give me a quote on both, please. Fast forward another week, and I do get one phone call from them with just a joke of a response telling me, yeah, man, it's going to be $17,000 to do a rebuild. And I'm like, okay, what about the swap? He's like, oh, yeah, I don't know anything about that. So at that point, I'm done. At that point, I give up. I start calling around other shops to find recommendations to do swaps. I hear back within an hour from 4 different shops, giving me quotes, explanations, all of that. And I finally settle on one of them. Who was it? It was Nate over at
Team Charlotte Motorsports. Great guy, walked me through the whole thing, sat down with me to like look through different engines on eBay Motors that I could bring over, engines that would work, engines that wouldn't, you know, explaining to me like, you know, why certain engines would be better than others and all that. Really sat down and got to know me and got to like talk to me for a minute. And like didn't treat me like a moron, didn't talk down to me, didn't point at me, didn't like raise his voice or anything like that. So whatever, that's all, like that's what happened. So next day I am on my way up to Mooresville, and I just call up the shop. I'm like, hey, by the way, when I dropped my bike off the next morning, I called them and explained I don't want any work done on the bike, I just want an estimate. So like a week later, after getting that joke of a response about 17,000, they call up and they say, hey, so yeah, man, or I call them up and I go, all right, I'm on my way to pick up the bike and bring it to a reputable shop. And the guy over the phone, a different guy, the guy who made the remarks of, oh, try to do it yourself, huh? Like that guy, whoever his name was, I never caught his name. He said, oh man, well, I'm sorry to lose your business. And I'm like, no, you're not. First of all, that's the first time anyone at your shop has said sorry about anything. Y'all can go F yourselves. I don't care. Y'all suck. I didn't say any of that to them, but I was thinking it. Show up with the tow truck. They push my bike up. Sure enough, it's been halfway torn apart because they're morons and can't follow even the most basic directions that you give them. And, you know, then Jay comes out and I ask him for the paperwork because at this point, I'm considering suing them. Because at this point, like, they have, as best as I can tell, not repaired my engine, charged me for repairing my engine, and then we're going to charge me again. So I wanted the paperwork. And then Jay comes out, and I got, like, the recording. I don't know how well it came out. If it came out well, I'll, like, cut it in here so you can hear, like, what this a-hole was saying to me in the parking lot about the paperwork.
That must be them. Do you need me to sign anything? Or?
No, you're good. So that you want the original ticket?
Yes, sir.
When you first came? That would be in the trash. That gets thrown in shred it box.
Okay.
And it all gets sent off to shred it and shredded.
Gotcha.
This is
as like a,
well, this is
as a security thing, right?
Well, yeah, but this is the only business I've ever worked at that they don't keep their records for a whole year. Because usually all these, like, usually like this. Mm-hmm. Like after I get done doing all these notes and shit and put it in a computer, this gets put in a shred-it box.
Wow.
Yeah.
That like fast, huh?
Every company I've ever worked for usually puts it in a box, labels it January, and packs it away for, you know, what is it?
Secure?
No, for in case you get audited.
Right. But these 7 years and you can get audited.
But
still.
yeah, but these people, they put it in the shredded bin and they come and get it.
So I don't know if any of that was there or if I didn't say anything. But yeah, like at this point I'm so done with these people. So I load up the bike and take it to Team Charlotte, and the rest is history. I mean, the bike's there now. They've been communicating when the engine came in. They communicated, cracking open the engine, asked like if I wanted to see it in person too. You know, they've just been real nice, and they've communicated what's going on. They've been realistic and told me like, hey, just so you know, we're slammed. It's gonna take a while before we get to your engine. Is that okay? Like, they've been telling me when something's going to go wrong, when something's gonna take a long time. That's just not something I was getting at Interstate Cycles, and that sucks. So yeah, I mean, now I've got a new bike. But yeah, like, I mean, there's good shops and there's bad shops, you know? You just gotta learn what's good, what's bad, who will do a good job and who won't. And Interstate Cycles, man, they did not do a good job. They didn't even do a decent job or passable job. Like, they straight up failed. 100%. They just straight up failed. I didn't realize this road went nowhere. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's just like they had like recent turnover, but looking at their 1-star reviews and how they've responded to other customers who have given them 1 star, I'm inclined to believe that it's a problem with them. Because when you read their responses, like if you can look them up, Team Char or Interstate Cycles in Mooresville, North Carolina, look them up and go to their 1-star reviews and read how they have responded to customer complaints. Just read them. One of them just straight up reads nope. So yeah, I mean, like, these people clearly don't care about making the customer happy. Not at all. The only person who said he's sorry about what happened to my bike was when I was loading the bike up onto the trailer. One of the sales people came over and he said, "Oh man, I'm sorry this happened to you." And I'm like, thank you. You are the one person who actually said sorry. If I had had any interaction with you, or if you were in the service, or if you would talk to the service people, this might have ended differently. Oh well. It is what it is. So, yeah, that is gonna be it. That's it for picking that. And just as so you have an example of what a good dealership is, I wish that they worked on Triumphs, or I would have exclusively gone to them. 10 Cycles down in Matthews, North Carolina. Oh my God, I love them to death. If they work on Yamahas, I'm going to be bringing this here almost exclusively too, because they are the best. The one, like, I took them there for everything for the Husqvarna, and the one time I had a problem, it was with the tires. I think I mentioned it in my thing about the 2 issues about the bike. But brought it in for tires, and walked through with their service guy, who he walked me through what tires would work, what sizes would work. We settled on a Shinko. I can't remember what it was, but they uninstalled the old tire, put on the new one, and went to put it on the bike, and it just wouldn't fit. It wouldn't clear the fender. So they apologized, overnighted the correct tire that I asked for instead. I said, oh well, let's try this tire. They overnighted it and then put it on the next day and only charged me the labor for 1 install. Yes. Oh my God, you guys get it. You guys are the best. You rock. So yeah, look for a shop that is looking out for you. Look for a shop that isn't going to make excuses. Look for a shop that isn't going to say, yeah, well, no. Look for a shop that puts the customer first. Look for a shop that seems like they care about you, the rider, not just about making money, and certainly not about lying to your face and then ripping you off. So that's going to do it. And I don't know, I'm probably going to link this into my Google review just so that way there's a clear record of all this. So yeah, that's just what's going on. Yeah, got nothing more to say. Wanted to make this video on the bike because I have not been out riding around and the weather is beautiful. So yeah, I mean, what's up next for the channel? Don't know, but I'm going to get out here and ride some more. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. If you want to see more content, go ahead and ring the bell for notifications, subscribe, give it a thumbs up. If you're from Team Interstate Cycles, I mean, just go ahead and take whatever your excuse is and shove it up your ass. And yeah, I mean, Team Charlotte Motorsports, you guys rock. 10 Cycles, man, you guys are the absolute best, and I wish that you guys worked on Triumphs. I would have gone to you in a heartbeat. But that is going to do it for me. Have a good one.